To members, or good afternoon to members of the media. Allow me to say that this budget, accelerating growth, anchoring fiscal stability, is a budget that makes sense if it is to become a reality. But we have seen many budgets fall to the floor before, and we have the lack of financing as the major reasons for why budgets failed. I took particular note of the Finance Secretary's statement, and I did not know if to laugh, if to cry, or if to pull out 2 grain of hair when she almost threatened the central government, and I use the word threaten the central government, that if they don't have 5.9% of the budget, it is some type of a fiscal, I don't know, fiscal negativity, so to speak. I saw that as a open threat to the central government, and I'm not sure if it is the type of relationship that one would want with a new central government. There should be no threats whatsoever. Don't try to look tough. Don't try to stand up on the air. You're going to fall down. And I wish to say to the secretary, whenever she has another chance, to take back those words. Those are not polite words. You spoke of partnering and etc. with central government. We need to partner. Even with your political enemies, you need to partner, because when the election is finished, we have a country to run. And the people of Tobago, they are not no 60,000 crab in the barrel. And certainly, Fali Augustine doesn't have the biggest Gandhi. What we have in Tobago is the people of Tobago looking to a THA for good governance, looking to the THA for growth and stability. And this book speaks of it. If the plans are implemented, it's good. But it's time to stop the showboating and stop the gamesmanship. It is time to speak in humble terms and tones and work hard to get more money for Tobago and put more policies in place that will prevent mismanagement of funds when they enter the CAF. I'll say more on this in an analytical and a financial way when my turn to speak on Thursday. Thank you very much.
On a rate of 1 to 10, how would you rate the budget?
I give the budget 10 out of 10. That's me speaking sarcastically. Thank you.
Fellow Tobagonians, so we just witnessed the presentation of the Tobago House of Assembly's budget 2025-2026, and I would allow my minority councillor just to give her reflections quite briefly.
Good morning to members of the media. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, Tobago. So as the minority leader indicated, we would have just heard the maiden budget presentation of the Secretary of Finance, Councillor Roberts. The Secretary did indicate in her previous interviews that the statement today would be different. However, we did not see much of a difference in terms of the presentation. What we recognize is that the Secretary shared in broad perspective what the administration intends to do for fiscal 2026. The Secretary also would have highlighted some of the achievements from the past 3 years in office. However, with the comments by the said Secretary to the Minister of Finance, former Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert, when he did a similar report to the people from his last budget statement for fiscal 2025. The Secretary condemned the way in which he brought the report, and she condemned the presentation that he did at that time. And I think what the Secretary did this time around was similarly to give a report or to give achievements of this administration for the past 3 years. There were some promises that were made in previous budgets that has not yet materialized. Particularly, we looked at housing, where in the first year there was a promise of 1,000 homes, and then it was reduced to 800 and then 600. There was no mention in terms of the achievement in terms of housing, and there are a lot of details that, particularly in terms of promises and projects and initiatives that would have been promised or projected that has not yet materialized, there was no mention in that regard. Another thing that was also highlighted was the comments on the economy. The Secretary of Finance, would have, in our view, a bit contradictory, because she indicated preliminary that there were some improvements and growth in the economy, particularly in the non-energy sector. And a few moments later, the Secretary attempted to quote from the current Minister of Finance, Tanku's presentation, basically shaping as if the economy is in crisis and the economy has crashed. The Secretary also made no mention in relation to the midterm allocation that was recently received of $32 million, which has been the lowest midterm allocation over the duration of this administration, 2021 to present. If we recall, in 2022, the midterm was 100 million, then it was 60 million, and the Secretary made no mention of the comparative amongst or their comparative allocations from the previous PNM administration to this current allocation. The Secretary also spoke about collaboration, but so far we have not seen the fruits of the collaboration. She indicated that she was hopeful in relation to what would come, but we have not seen anything really materialize. So we hope that going forward in the budget debate that we would hear some more details coming from the various secretaries as to the achievements and some of the things that were highlighted that should have been achieved, and greater details in terms of what they intend to do going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Benoit. And let me start by congratulating the Secretary on her maiden budgetary presentation. I thought it was, on paper, a fair attempt. But in reality, what the team suggests that it is accelerating growth, anchoring fiscal stability. But what the Tobago People's Party has actually succeeded in is not accelerating growth, but instead accelerating Tobago's economic decline. They have not anchored stability, but have anchored our island in fiscal stagnation, leaving our people adrift in a sea of empty promises and squandered opportunities. What is the hard reality on the ground? Under this current administration, after 4 years, our tourism sector, which is our lifeblood, is basically dead. If you go to the hotels, you will not see tourists there. If you go on the beaches, you will not see the number of tourists, especially international tourists there. And when you talk to the stakeholders, you are hearing the pain, the struggle, and the financial depredation that they are facing at this time. And therefore, it is quite, disingenuous for this administration to talk about growth when in fact what we are witnessing is serious decline. The agricultural sector, for for instance, is almost non-existent. The secretary said that the agriculture sector only contributed, in addition to the manufacturing sector, it was so small that they had to group it with manufacturing, and that was only 2%. There was a time when agriculture also was a mainstay in Tobago, where we fed ourselves to the point that we were also exporting to Trinidad and the other islands. And now we are in a position where agriculture is so bad, in such a bad state, that it has to be grouped with manufacturing just to make 2% of the GDP of Tobago. And when you talk about our contract workers, teachers, over $10 million owed to teachers on contract. I have received numerous calls from persons in the Department of Sport, can't get their contract gratuity. The THA is owing workers, paying workers late, and on top of it, boasting about 1% unemployment, but at the same time, their mainstay in terms of employment generation is something called 10 on, 10 off, where these workers are paid menial salary, 5 days for 2 weeks. And therefore, I cannot understand how a THA that promotes this notion of the greatest little island on the planet treats its own people as subservience. And therefore, what we have witnessed over the past 4 years can only be described as the collapse of the Tobago economy under Farley and friends. But a new dawn is coming, and a new day will soon arrive, when Tobago can chart a new course under a new administration, where we will prioritize our young people, our sport people, our young professionals, put real programs in place for returning scholars, because at this point in time, we are wasting our most precious resource, which is our human resource, those young people we send out to go and learn all these fancy degrees. And when they return to Tobago, there's little to nothing to do for them. We guarantee you a place. And we'll speak more about that. We'll speak to our athletes. Our athletes, imagine just recently for the secondary schools, our athletes were treated so poor diet, unable to get proper food to eat. They couldn't even get proper accommodation, had to be rushed out from the Hazy Crawford Stadium because no proper facilitation was made for them. And this is how we are treating our athletes in Tobago. Housing Minority Council mentioned it. You call out 200 persons were given letters for the housing program down at Riseland. And those persons, after 3.5 years, that is all they are left with. The letters. No construction, no allocation, and all they have been given is false hope. We asked the Secretary of Housing initially, when he announced the ambitious plans of 1,000 homes, how are you going to fund these homes? And he said to us, watch me work. We have watched him for 4 years, and he has done absolutely no work because there are 0 houses constructed under this administration. No lands given. All they are doing is basically enjoying the benefits of PNM's development over the previous years. Because you are seeing it in the recommissioning. There are no new construction. Across the length and breadth of Tobago, and what they have tried, they have failed. Those four emergency roads, only one road has been constructed, and it leads you right back into traffic. And the other 3 are in stages of, one, the contract we are told has finally been cancelled. The other one at Lamy Road is still incomplete. And of course, we know the status of the other one at Chauvin, where we're still able to utilize it in the way it should. So what we have witnessed, as I said, is 4 years of failed promises and economic disaster. I thank you, and if there's any question, I will take that at this time. If not, We thank you for the time, and you would hear more of my presentation, especially how we will chart a new course for Tobago in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. The media, Tobago, we have just had my maiden budget presentation for fiscal 2026. I think that this is the catalyst for the change in Tobago, as we now have a different format from the traditional format, and we now also have the development program priorities, the development agenda priorities coming out of the strategic development planning pathway for Tobago. And it is in that vein that the Tobago's budget presentation was formulated. We also used the strategic selectivity framework. We also looked at both the national economy, the global economies, and what is happening in the economic space. The budget basically is a total of $3.71 billion in total, and disaggregated, the recurrent expenditure is $2.71 billion, and development program $1 billion. It's basically a little less than last year's budget, as it was predicated on the projected revenues from at the national level of $63.5 billion. And we are looking at a percentage of 5.9% this year, nothing less than that. We think that this is fair, reasonable, and just, considering the population size of Tobago and the development agenda priorities that we intend to accelerate in fiscal 2026. Any questions? I think I was more focused on the strategy rather than me. I didn't take this position for me. I took this position for the people of Tobago. We have a fantastic planning pathway, which we will launch at the end of this month, and then we will engage the public. So we are launching it internally with the members of the government, this executive, and the senior public servants, and then we'll go throughout the entire THA, and then we'll in turn communicate with the people of Tobago. But it's a fantastic planning pathway. And if you listen to my budget presentation, I've outlined some key transforming sectors. And those things came out of the development agenda priority areas. We also have implemented a commitment for results framework, a tool that will ensure that we do performance management of these initiatives to ensure that we are in the right direction in becoming the greatest little island on the planet.
Usual question. You requested 5.9%, but in the event that you do not, you said nothing else, you firm on that. But in the event that you don't receive the 5.9%, what is the plan? Or we are prioritizing usually the response, but what are your plans?
Well, the plans remain the same. Obviously, it would have to scale down because basically our priorities are our priorities. They would not change. We have adopted the strategic planning pathway. That is what we will be going with for the next 20 years in 5-year chunks. So if you recognize, I've spoken about some 2025 to 2030 investments. And therefore, those are the areas we intend to advance, especially in fiscal 2026. For instance, we want to see GDP growth, creation of employment. We want affordable housing for all. We want to have a sustainable tourism economy. All of these things and all of these actionable items I discussed this morning will be advanced despite the allocations. I did have conversations with the minister who did indicate, we'll try our best to go with the population size. If you recognize, I've gone about some percentage points more than that. And that is because Tobago has to catch up. We have a lot of catching up to do. And our agenda priorities far outweigh the national priorities. So it is in that vein you see a little more than 5.1%. But we are asking, we are requesting, and we are not going to accept less than 5.9% of the national budget.
Mr. Chief Secretary, what are your feelings? Mrs. Catalan, whether she has taken over from you. What are your feelings, Mr. Chief?
Well, I could tell you, I slept extremely well last night.
I slept well too.
I was not in a rush this morning. At 9 o'clock, I was at the barber, quite relaxed. And I think Secretary Roberts is a breath of fresh air. I also think that she's on the right pathway in terms of implementing some of the changes that we want to see. I think critically, she made all women, all girls proud today, because it's reflective of the fact that what a man can do, a woman perhaps can do, and even do better. It's also reflective of the fact that this government is above international standards when it comes to the ratio between men and women in the government, and we are not afraid of putting women at the front lines of this political battle that we fight every single day. I think the most important element is the fact that we are now predicating the budget on the planning pathway, the development pathway. As the Secretary said, in a month's time it will be launched. In fact, the website is practically completed. And so when the Secretary joined me and the rest of the team in launching that pathway, which came out of the overarching belief in making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet, we will be setting Tobago on a clear pathway for the next 20 years. It's important to note that in 2001, when the government changed, we did not get a development plan until that government was in the second term in office. We continue as we have been doing, and we are providing not just the plans, but the pathway in our first term in office. Notice I said in our first term in office, which means that there will be many more. And so that too is a landmark achievement. Importantly, the Secretary was able to get the budget down to just under 2 hours. So I'm sure you are very grateful. You did not have to hear me today. It could be for 4 hours. So and this might be a first for the country as a whole, because traditionally the budgets are very long. And so we're even looking at whether it really needs to be that long, because people lose some of the details after a while anyway. And there are other mechanisms by which we could get the details out to individuals. And certainly I think she is competent enough to negotiate along with the members of Parliament, with the Minister and the Ministry of Finance in Trinidad, to ensure that 5.9% is realized come the new fiscal year.
Tobago's economy relies heavily on tourism. What role does the budget play in revitalizing the sector and attracting investments?
Well, I think the statement would have covered the broad areas in terms of destination marketing, trying to improve airlift. But we do, in the development agenda priorities, we will outline the various things. But we don't want to get too much into the details, because as one of the reporters asked, if I get less, what will happen? But the priorities remain the same in terms of destination marketing. Also, another thing we intend to do, usually our priorities are division specific. Now we want to look at broad sectors. So for instance, if you recognize, I've said that specific divisions will collaborate and to achieve these objectives. So basically there are some broad areas in terms of product, the marketing of Tobago improving airlift, even the simple customer service training. We want to also hone and monetize our talents in Tobago. So there are several initiatives that the Secretary of Tourism will elaborate on, and basically the framework has been set today. So the budget framework has been set. So the secretaries now will go and develop the plans, programs and projects based on the broad policies set out here today.
Also important, I wanted to share this bit of information quickly that I don't want us to miss from the Secretary's presentation today. Last year we recognized a 1% growth in the economy. This year we are 3% growth. So it means that our local economy, the Tobago economy, is in fact recovering and has recovered from COVID-19. Secondly, she spoke to the fact that our unemployment is at 1%, which is in fact lower than the national average. So, and yes, we do feel that there are pockets of individuals requiring employment, but this is an achievement to be lower than the national average when it comes to the unemployment rate. And in fact, in macroeconomics, 1% unemployment is practically negligible, right? Then the third area is to note is that in terms of employment by the state sector, that's now at 54%. When we came into office, the state employed at least 70% of individuals. So let's walk logics, because I know logics and critical thinking is scarce on the other side. But let's look at it. So the state sector employs 54%, which is a lower percentage point than what we inherited. Unemployment is at 1%. It stands to reason, therefore, that there is growth in the private sector that is accounting for the employment. And that is, in fact, what we want for a robust economy, because we cannot sustain an economy where the state sector continues to carry a significant burden in terms of employment and salaries. That means we should be able to recognize some savings on the current side that can be transferred to the development side of the budget. And of course, all of that being tied into the fact that some 4,000 jobs were created. This 4,000 does not include the 10-on, 10-off program. And 10-on, 10-off, that's not counted in our unemployment rate either. So it means that overall, we are seeing a much healthier economy than the one we have inherited. And notwithstanding inheriting it in the dwindling days of COVID-19 with a $1 billion liability for the THE, it means that this administration has done well in transforming the economy. And we're really happy for the work that not just the Secretary of Finance, who is here for just a year. In fact, last year, she had just gotten up instrument of appointment. I did the budget for the last time last year. She sat in the first debate in the budget debates last year and followed the proceedings. But not just her I want to congratulate today, but also all of the hardworking secretaries and assistant secretaries, the public officers, technical officers in the division. This week is also Public Admin Week, or Public Service Week, and it's also a good time to recognize those who work hard. Yes, there are challenges there in terms of delivery and ability to execute in a timely manner, but what we have been able to achieve as a team where no one here was ever on an executive before, a team of people who are relatively young. Mr. James might be the oldest among us, or Clark. Relatively young. So that might be Clark. Relatively young team, comparatively young team. Insofar as governance for an island is concerned, I think Tobago has every right to be proud.
Yes.
And when we also look at what we have experienced in terms of challenges, from 2022 to present, and I detailed it some time ago, what happened in the first year, then the second year, the third, and so on and so on. We remain stable. we remain grounded and rooted in the desire to build out a better Tobago, a much more successful Tobago. And I think now that we are 3.5 years in, Tobagonians can see clearly that they made the right choice and they don't have buyer's remorse from 2021, and we're just happy for that, and we give God all the thanks and praise for that, and we thank Tobagonians for their continued support. Most importantly, we thank you, Tobagonians, for your continued support. And I just wanted to highlight just those few noticeable achievements. And then when the secretaries speak on Thursday, the secretaries will do the drill down in terms of what's happening in the divisions and how we can accelerate delivery even more.
If you would allow me, I'd like to speak on a novel deliverable, of the financial statements that were tabled today. I don't think I know that this is evidence of public trust and accountability in this administration. When I came into office, it took me a year, and I said I wanted to table those financial statements months ago, actually. But you can imagine the difficulties of trying to prepare a financial statement with a manual system. And that's another initiative I've spoken to the Minister of Finance about, because for the last 10 years, they've been trying with a program called IFMIS, Integrated Financial Management Information System. It has been partially implemented in Trinidad, and I've asked the Minister to let us advance that in Tobago. Yeah. And therefore, Tobagonians will be able to get their financial statements in real time. But what I've done today is given Tobago what has transpired over the last 6 years or 6 financial years. And I'm pushing and pressing for fiscal 2024's financial statement to be tabled when we reopen or restart in September. So I do not take this very lightly. That is a mammoth task. Yes. And apart from the task, it sends a message that this administration is transparent, accountable, and you can have the trust and confidence in us.
Sure.
Come quickly, my darling.
Come
George.
Yeah.
Right next to me, my friend. They were ready to start. No problem.
You can see everybody? I cannot talk. Oh. No, you don't.
Center.
I got. Make sure you see everybody, right?
Yeah, Mr.
You see, we are a pretty bunch.
Yes, I was just going to say.
James.
Short man, James.